Welcome to another installment of Deconstructing Babylon, where we discern the signs and symbols of the mystery religion of Hollywood Babylon. I am the Discerning Clerk, a born-again believer and former video store clerk who takes God at his word. I use a biblical framework to deconstruct some of my favorite movies from the 90s, so that when Messiah returns, I am not deceived. Most of my takes are red hot and not for the faint of heart, so you've been warned. My first boyfriend in high school worked at the Dollar Theater, which is where you would find me every Friday and Saturday for a double feature. And like Romeo and Juliet before it, I watched today's selected film at least a dozen times on the big screen. Scream was released in 1996 and turned the horror genre on its head, injecting it with new life and introducing director Wes Craven to a new generation. The Video Movie Guide even gives it a higher than average 3.5 stars. This bloody, playful slice of offbeat horror comedy alternately spoofs and chillingly mimics the slasher film genre. Here, a stalker dresses as the Grim Reaper and butchers teens just to see what your insides look like. It's a scary, often hilarious movie about kids who have picked up all the unwritten rules of Hollywood slasher films, but break them anyway. Rated R. I feel like the reviewer here didn't actually watch the movie in this case, but wrote the review based on the trailer only. Because while there are some funny lines and moments, it's certainly not the hilarious romp they make it out to be. Anyway, without further ado, let's see what we see in Scream. The first image we are shown is a ringing telephone, which is almost its own character in this movie. The phone is picked up by Casey, played by Drew Barrymore, that filmmakers made us believe she was the leading lady. She is featured most in the trailer and is largest on the cover.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Alas, it is not so. A red herring, as it were. She is merely the second victim of the Ghostface killer before the opening credits even roll. Right off the bat, I'm noticing some color symbolism. Casey's boyfriend Steve wears a blue and gold jacket, and Casey likewise, only muted. It's possible they represent sun and moon, but it could be more of a red herring, which is a writing term for a misdirection, as it were. Oh yeah, this is really hilarious. How awful. But Sidney Prescott is our true leading lady, the Scream Queen for millennials.
I could have sworn I heard screaming.
Her boyfriend, Billy Loomis, dark and mysterious, unconvincingly cosplaying as the good guy, visits Sidney in her bedroom as their classmates Steve and Casey are brutally murdered. The next day at school is a police and media circus, where we are introduced to tabloid journalist Gale Weathers, and we quickly learn some of Sidney's backstory. That includes her mother, Maureen, being killed.
She was daughter of,
Slasher flicks innately have a large supporting cast of characters because most of them need to be expendable, regardless of how much the audience loves them. Sidney's best friend Tatum is dating Billy's best friend Stu, and Randy is the perpetual fifth wheel and punching bag.
Working, thank you.
Oh, at the video store?
But we love Randy because he was the OG Discerning Clerk. Sidney isn't just the main girl, the new Scream Queen, but she's also a grieving daughter. Only been 1 year since her mother was brutally murdered, but tears never come for Sid, only fear.
Do you want to die, Sidney? Your mother sure didn't.
The plot thickens. The caller is also Maureen's killer. When Sidney is attacked, she escapes into the arms of Billy, who's always lurking around, and fear drives her away once more. Gale Weathers arrives on scene of this developing story like any good investigative journalist.
Jesus, the camera, hurry!
My name isn't Jesus.
And Dewey is Tatum's older brother and the sheriff's deputy on this strange and scary case.
When I wear this badge, you treat me like a man of the law.
Next to Gale Weathers, Dewey Riley is the longest surviving character in the ongoing anthology. Actors Courtney Cox and David Arquette met on set, married and divorced, yet the Scream movies endure. But I digress.
Let's get back to work.
Sidney's dad is away for a business trip, and Sid stays with her bestie Tatum amidst the traumatic events. Her dad is immediately a suspect when he can't be reached to tell him what's happened to his daughter, but they don't really dwell on it too much.
My dad? I don't think so.
The small town is gripped with fear after the reported attack on Sidney by the same madman that killed Casey and Steve. He's targeting high school students, but he also killed Maureen a year ago. The connection to Sydney's mother cannot be missed, as we learn the man facing the death penalty for her murder may have been wrongly accused by Sydney herself during the criminal trial, which is alleged to have also happened in the last year. Gail's involvement in the case meant getting the story from the accused caught and weary.
Killer's still on the loose, isn't he?
But that is the implication. Sydney comes face to face with Billy and is also confronted with what she suspects about him, the anniversary of her mother's death and her own near-death experience.
I know, it's been a year.
Tomorrow. 1 year tomorrow.
The school suspends instruction, the town comes under a curfew for everyone's safety, and the investigation carries on. More connections to Sydney and her mother are made. Meanwhile, it's been a minute since someone has died, and Wes Craven has a rule about the body count, so someone has to go. And it's Mr. Himbry, the school's principal, who seems to think the students deserve the punishment being doled out by the Ghostface.
Your entire havoc-inducing, thieving, whoring generation disgusts me.
Clerk Randy gets a little spotlight simply for knowing what's going on, cinematically speaking. He's asked the questions about Sydney, her father, and her boyfriend.
It's the millennium. Motives are incidental.
It's still a 90s movie at the end of the day, and we really can't go without misogyny. Talk of Sydney's mother being unfaithful with multiple partners, and maybe the fruit doesn't fall too far from the tree. Perhaps that was Billy's hope. Randy believes Sydney's chastity could be motive enough for Billy to kill her. Even Sydney believes something is wrong with her when she lacks the desire to be intimate with Billy.
How many guys will put up with a girlfriend who's sexually anorexic?
The second half of the movie takes place at Stu's house during a curfew party when his parents are also away. I feel like the 90s were the last decade to have house parties. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the advent of smartphones and social media puts an end to this kind of adolescent experience.
Any camera.
Unfortunately, it's time for someone else to die, and poor Tatum is next.
No, please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel.
We know that slasher killers in movies are unusually strong, but I didn't know it also applied to impromptu weapons. Billy's lurking around the party and wants to make up with Sid. She agrees to talk to him and denies any instinct she has about him. She's more afraid to learn the truth about her mother and what it might mean about her.
Like the bad seed or something.
Cut to the party happening below them and the horror movie marathon. Stu doesn't seem to be missing his girlfriend Tatum, who went to the garage for beers and never came back. And Randy takes us to church to preach about the law. I mean, the rules of horror movies.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie.
Dewey keeps Gail in the loop of his investigation, but mainly because he wants to spend more time with her. It's actually sweet to watch their on-screen relationship develop with their real-life one. But together they make an important discovery.
This is Neil Prescott's car.
Back at the house, Billy and Sydney are all done being intimate, and Sid seems like a completely different person when she has a moment of clarity. She can't shake the thought that her boyfriend is dangerous.
What do I have to do to prove to you that I'm not a killer?
I mean, getting killed by the killer ought to do it. So now we're in a death race to the end as Sydney gets chased by Ghostface through the house, out of the house, in a van, and into the woods.
I told you he's right around the corner.
Gail makes a gruesome discovery, her cameraman Kenny, who didn't make it. Dewey is stabbed in the back, and Ghostface persists in his murderous rampage. Suspects have been narrowed down to Randy and Stu. And Sid's father, too, I guess. Everyone else is dead.
Sid.
Oh, never mind.
Surprise, Sydney.
And the twist no one saw coming. Not one, but two psycho killers. The same psychos who killed Maureen and got away with it.
Tell that to Cotton Weary.
The villains share their motives and plans, as villains do. We get Billy's motive for the killing spree.
Total abandonment causes serious deviant behaviors.
He tells Sydney her mother was having an affair with his father, causing his mother to abandon their family. If you've seen the sequel, you know Mrs. Loomis comes back to avenge the son she left behind. But I'm super curious about the timing of all of this. How old was Billy when she abandoned him? Was it before he started dating Sydney 2 years ago? Was it when he was still a child? How did he even find out it was Maureen? Doesn't he have any contact with his mother? Sorry to digress so late in the game. For such a tight script, this is a pretty glaring plot hole. But the duo cover their bases when they also reveal they are framing Sydney's father for the latest killing. They get a little stab happy with each other and are distracted enough and increasingly impaired that Gail Weathers intervenes.
The reporter left for dead in the news van comes too.
Sydney outwits the attackers and finally fights them off, and several people have survived with their lives.
Oh my God, Randy, I thought you were dead.
I probably should be.
Gail comes to again, just in time to save Sydney from a quickly revived Billy.
This is the moment when the supposedly dead killer comes back to life for one last scare.
Mr. Prescott comes out of the closet, and even Dewey is going to make it. The movie ends with a hazy shot of the sunrise. If we take a look at IMDb, it tells us when Billy was the killer and when Stu was the killer and when they both were. They both killed Steve and Casey in the beginning. Billy killed Mr. Himbry, the principal, Tatum, and he nearly killed Randy and Dewey and Sydney. Stu killed Kenny and tried to kill Gail and Sid as well. And only some of these deaths had motivation. The rest, they said, were simply at the hands of two deranged psychopaths, which was meant to make it more scary, not funny. The lack of motivation in the killers is a reflection of the lack of symbolism throughout. It's an intentional choice to make it vague and keep it vague. But I do still see sun and moon symbolism represented by gold or yellow and blue. Casey was the sun and Steve was the moon. And whatever else we know about them doesn't matter. The unity they represented is destroyed. The school colors are blue and gold, and Mr. Himbry embodies them as the father to the students and faculty. His position is violently ripped away, and with it, his desire for justice. Sydney is the moon. Her relationship with Billy is a mirror, which means he cannot be the sun. They both seem like two sides of the same coin when they're together. They're both dark-haired, mainly wear blue, and have both lost the direct relationship with their mother. Tatum is the sun to Sydney's moon. Her blonde hair and wearing yellow in contrast, her light is snuffed out, which makes her the only one of the group who has a noble death, so to speak. She is also the sister to the lawman, Dewey. Police officers have a duty to know and uphold the law of the land. I liken them to the priests of the Old Testament who had to know and uphold the law of Yahweh. Dewey is ultimately betrayed or stabbed in the back by sin and death, and he lives. And Randy, dear Randy, I see him as a prophet of sorts, speaking the law of truth, but that could just be me projecting. Fear is a prevalent theme throughout. Fear of losing your parent to death or divorce, fear of losing a partner to abandonment because you won't have sex with them, fear of being attacked in the safety of your own home, fear that the attacker is someone close to you, fear that the sins of the mother are passed on. But fear is what's just under the surface. Deep down, the symbolism points to a glorification of death. While the killer was called Ghostface, the costume was called Father Death. In this case, there were two fathers that may be called Sin and Death. They worked together to take out mostly unsuspecting people for an undisclosed reason.
The sin factor. It says sin.
They are both put to final death by Sydney, who isn't the Christ figure, but is herself the daughter of Jezebel. So I'm starting to feel a bit too wordy, and I know I haven't even covered it all. What about Gail and Mr. Prescott and Stu? I've already made some pretty wild claims, so I'm going to leave it there for now. Thank you for enduring to the end. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and a thumbs down if you didn't. Subscribe if you want to, but don't follow me. Follow the one who saves you. And until next time, keep looking out.
Watch a few movies, take a few notes. It was fun.